Welcome to We're Not Pros. This is a YouTube show where we talk about games, and I was this close to saying video games, which is we started talking about video games, but we talk about all the games, anything. I mean, we mostly talk about video games because that's our area of expertise, but we like to talk about all of them.
And
And I'm joined by Matt, who was about to say something. Matt, go ahead.
yeah, well, I'm going to say this is a very emotional episode for us for a couple of reasons. One, look at all this black. I swear we didn't line this up today. This just happened to be what, like, you can see this is a novelty shirt. That's why I'm doing it. But it's a very black and emotional episode that gets into your soul. I'm gonna get ripped out for that one later. But we are
Much later, once we actually start getting viewers.
yeah. On a more practical level, this is also an episode we want to talk about various moments, ideals, and various kind of, I don't want to say aha moments, but gaming is an interactive medium. It's between you and a piece of art, you between other people, and we wanted to get a little more subjective just for this episode and talk about like moments we were actually kind of touched. Like show me on the doll where this game touched you.
I think you've encapsulated most of what we're going for. The term that I initially thought of was formative experiences that, like you said with AHA, solidified or crystallized our understanding of games, which has informed a lot of the discussions that we've had up to this point and going forward. And some of these experiences are ones that were delightful. Maybe some of them were upsetting or frustrating or disappointing or any emotion. But yes, this is definitely like stuff that really stuck with us for one reason or another.
And because this is a mostly improv show, we will now rock, paper, scissors to see who goes first. Well, you
Sorry.
won.
I know. I thought this person always is like, "Oh, you want to do best of three?" No. Okay. All right. So actually, the first one that I wanted to start with is one that happened to me recently, and I'm pleased that I've got a recent example because I was worried that, you know, at the ripe old age of 28, that I was done with like having these experiences, having these aha moments, but I did. And this occurred in May 2018, and it was during Get On My Level, which is the Canadian Smashinal, and I'm hoping they use that. And it's a 3-day, yeah, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah, it's a 3-day Smash extravaganza. We rent out one of the convention halls at the Metro, not the Metro, Mississauga Center, and it's just like Smash galore. You can go in on Friday and just play Smash to your heart's content. There's the major tournaments, of course. There's side tournaments. It's great, and I didn't do very well at all in any of the tournaments that I entered. But what was probably the best thing that happened to me was one of the players who had really worked his way up through the ranks and is considered to be a relatively good player in the local scene offered to, I'll throw his name out there. He goes by JW, very good player, and he offered to money match me. And what a money match is when there's now money on the line, and it tries to emulate the tension involved in a bracket where there is something tangible to win or lose. And for people who are clearly like not going to win it, it's a lesson basically. But it's a good lesson. It's a valuable lesson because they're playing to win the money and they're playing to win. After he wipes the floor with me, he offered me some really good insight into where I was starting to falter in the first 5 seconds of the rounds. And what he said was, Smash is a guessing game. And then he showed me a gameplay footage of him going up against one of the top players in the world who goes by DeBuzz. And DeBuzz had a read on him. Everything that JW tried to do, DeBuzz would come in and answer for it and cleared the victory. And when he said Smash was a guessing game, every game that I played of Smash up until now and from that point isn't like any other Smash game that I'd played. I started to kind of feel my way through it, try to be more unpredictable. Now it's so focused on like, oh, what's the move that I really want to do right now? Maybe I can wait. Maybe I can jump around a little bit and really try to like approach each game, each round like a new experience. And I had to thank him a day later when it really sunk in. And the funny thing for me is that other people have kind of said the same thing, but sometimes it needs to be articulated in a particular way in order for me to actually like get that dopamine release in my head of, oh, now I understand. And what I found was this was also like a shedding of the skin a little bit, and now I have a very different opinion of how I play Smash, which is hilarious to me because I've been playing Smash since the Nintendo 64, and I did not think I was going to make that next step forward, but I did, and so that was great for me because it happened recently too. I really didn't think that was going to happen. Over.
All right. The first one I want to start off with is actually a bit of a real life experience, but it was very heavily influenced by games. I had to take over the mailroom at a securities firm. Securities, by the way, being like the legal securities, the financial securities, not like physical security, stocks and bonds, that kind of stuff. And apparently they were training somebody else to do it, but then another person went on maternity leave. So the person they were training to take over the mailroom was now being shifted to the person who went on maternity leave, and they had 2 days to train me. I happened to know the right person, know the right person. That's how I got the job, and there was a lot to take in. I mean, this is the mailroom for an entire legal office, pretty much. So on the last day, right before everything wraps up, like, the person's trying to make sure, do you understand everything? Do you want, understand this? And I apparently was told there were some duties that were just being suspended because they didn't have time to teach me that kind of stuff. So I asked her if we could just go through the entire office again and she could point out where all the desks are, do that whole thing again. We did that in the beginning, but that was just once. And this time I took a notepad and I drew a map, because that's kind of what you look for in games, in MMOs and adventure games, that kind of stuff. You open up the map, you open up the mini map, and it just has everything automatically labeled for you. It's like, oh, you're trying to find the armor vendor. This is where the armor vendor is. You're trying to find the whatever, the quest giver. Here's where the quest giver is. And that was something that I don't really think would have occurred to most people, to literally map out the entire office. Oh, here's a prominent plant. I'm going to add sure the plant is there because that's a good reference point. Okay, here we have
This
the
will
part.
be important later.
Yes. Pay attention to this fern. This fern will be very important later in the game. And then when we got to the other section of the offices, I flipped over and I drew another map of that. And that's how I was able to deliver the mail for the first few weeks. I had my mini map that I could just put all the mail out. And overall, they were pretty impressed with me and my performance. They actually gave me a summer position after the person came back from her 1 month vacation, like saving up a lot of hours there. And it was a very stressful job, but I definitely, I don't think most people would have thought to draw a literal map of the office and mark everybody's desks. I think that was something that occurred to me specifically because I'm a gamer, because I play games, and this is a resource I'm used to using.
I think as soon as you said how maps come up in all of the different games that you brought up, I was just picturing like a soccer player trying to. He's got the ball. He's like, hang on. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Like so. Yeah. No.
According to Google Maps, I should not be traveling through this side of the map because it's apparently filled with construction.
I guess that's specific to Toronto FC's issues. Yeah, man. I like that you told me that. It hasn't reminded me of anything of any situation in particular where like I tried to use some of the skills that I learned in gaming to and apply that into. Not to say that I don't do it. I think there are just some basic skills that we take with us from games. Cooperation. For team environments games are a good way to teach cooperation. I would guess. Like if I remember when I had to work at a grocery store once in a while, they would send us to the cash register to help the cashiers because there were so many people in line that they just needed people to help kind of get things into the bags. And so I think at that point my game sense clicked in and I was starting to focus on like micromanaging and moving things around effectively, very Tetris-y, I should say. But that's not one of the things I've written down. That's just me touching on what you said. All right, so the next one that I had in mind is actually how I met you, which I consider to be a formative experience because I think it spoke to the power and the social power that gaming has. So initially, I got into Magic the Gathering because I was hanging out with some friends in the arts community, and we got together and played some Magic, and there was that moment where I realized how the game works, which kind of clicked in. It's like, oh, you tap mana, you get to do things. Oh, wow, that's so simple, but cool. Okay. And then I was hooked. So I had bought a Maraudon Besieged starter deck, and it had no chance against my friend who also was named Matt, who his decks were all customized and so on. So the initial learning curve was frustrating to know how much better other people's decks are, and also he's not like a tournament player. He's just like a guy who plays Magic, who's pretty good relative to my skill at the very least. But that didn't stop my enthusiasm for it. And for the first little while, I was walking around like a Pokemon trainer carries their balls in them at all times. I was just hoping that like Magic the Gathering was this huge thing, and that Magic the Gathering games would spontaneously break out. So I just had my first few decks on me basically all the time.
Well, I don't know if you remember the Yu-Gi-Oh when they had the Tournament City arc. Everyone walking around the city with their discs on their arms. It's like,
Yeah, I do remember that.
someone even mentioned, he's like, "This is some kind of fashion statement."
Yeah, I think that's actually where I stopped watching it. Yeah, I didn't get through the whole arc of that. Um, funny quick thing about Yu-Gi-Oh is that when we used to think that those little holographic stickers on the cards were how the holograms would come up when the technology was eventually made. We're not quite there yet. We're getting
No.
there, but we're not quite there yet.
No, that's how you know it's an authentic card versus a forgery. It's got the little hologram on it.
Right. Well, thank you for reminding me about that. I did forget what they were for, and you are correct. And so yeah, so I go to the Hairy Tarantula to indulge in my excitement and my enthusiasm. I was about to say addiction, but I deserve a little bit more credit than that because I've controlled it. And then I met you, and because I had my decks on me and you had your decks, we go over to the few meters of space left in the original Hairy Tarantula location that people could actually play on.
The glass
was all
table
the
that had all
anime
the anime.
DVDs. Yeah.
It's like that was not a table. Like, I don't think we really did a full game. We just sort of took a look at how your decks were functioning, or like we did like a
I thought
preliminary.
we did play.
Well, I don't quite remember again if we did like a full, here's our spin downs, here's our whatever thing. I thought we sort of just went through your deck to iron things out a bit, or then again that was a while ago, so maybe we did do a full game.
My memory is that I did play, and maybe because I didn't understand the nuances of Magic at the time, so it was probably like a mess of a game, and so it was more of, I think it might have been a hybrid between our two memories of it, where we kind of played, but we also kind of hammered it out, like, oh, here's what I would do on turn one, etc., etc.
Well, I just remember that the particular person staffing the place at the time was not the Magic person, so that's kind of why I stepped in to lend a hand, because you had questions that they didn't really have answers to, and I happened to overhear it because it was such a small store,
Yeah.
like you could just overhear everything in there.
Right. And so from that one instance, now imagine if I had, from that one instance, not only do I have one of my longest and dearest friends, but we've, thank you as well. I have had a whole new social network due to the people that you know and so on, and the events that you've put together. And now I just think, man, imagine if I didn't do that very often since, to be honest. Like, it's just, enthusiasm does tend to wax and wane. But if I had done that all the time, how many people could I have met? And who knows what, maybe I would have been replaced with somebody else on this show. Like, the possibilities are really endless because Magic the Gathering, and there's other games that are capable of this too, but this is Magic we're talking about. It draws in enough people with enough diversity of play styles that it's broad enough without being like Candy Crush. To like there's we would go to the Silver Snail when it was on Queen Street, Toronto references, excuse me, and there were adults, people who were married, people who were in school, people who apparently owned one of the 10 best aeration companies. It was the diversity of the people who played was as good as I could have expected, and it was formative for me because I'm still kind of like in awe of how good games are as a social tool. When initially, especially video games, but Dungeons and Dragons and card games and such have all had to deal with this and still continue to deal with it, is that these things are actually an anti-social tool, and that can be true for games that are single player that encourage people to lock themselves up in their room and not interact with anybody outside of the game. But even that is being taken down because now there's online communities, there's streaming, there's all sorts of ways that people can take even a very intimate experience like Elder Scrolls and turn it into a community-wide effort. And yeah, that's something that I think gaming really does better than other mediums to bring people together at a reasonable price too. Like for $200, getting a nice deck that can make a life's worth of friends. Versus spending $200 on a club, you can't hear anybody.
Hmm.
I'll take the cards most days.
I wonder if anyone's done a Twitch Plays Stanley Parable.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. There was one. It might not have been Stanley Parable. It might have
Well, there's
been
been
the
plenty of.
Beginner's Guide,
Oh.
where they were streaming somebody who was streaming the Stanley Parable, but then there was like another layer to it where somebody was like streaming somebody watching the stream, and I think another game was involved. And I know you're not a fan of Jim Sterling, but I saw it from him because he played that clip and then he was bleeding from all of his orifices, which is not unusual for him. But yeah,
Hmm. Oh, maybe that's a video I should look up then.
I would have to
Jim
figure
Sterling
out
bleeding from all his orifices.
I would have to figure out like what window of time it was when I regularly watched him because that time has passed. Which is the one thing that I find kind of bothersome about YouTube, just because there's so many good content creators, including us, that it's hard to like want to consistently be able to support somebody. So, anyways, that's a whole other thing now.
All right. So my next one actually involves you as well.
Also tough.
So I mentioned in our top games ever, Guilty Gear, and talking about the new ones, Xrd Revelator, all that kind of stuff. And we've played it a bunch. You tend to play Alphid, who is a very interesting character because she's a stance fighter who uses ranged weapons, which is just not something you'd find in most fighting games. It's kind of a Arc System Works is very good at doing those kinds of weird things. And last time we played it, we basically went through the entire roster of let's try every single character. Let's like put every single person out there just to see what they operate like. And there's a bunch of weird things, like just trying to figure out Dizzy, Zep, and Jacko's whole summon spirit things and the shenanigans with those. I mean, I don't think I ever used them effectively the entire game, but like just going to practice mode and just seeing like what is the stupidity we can do with these big bags of ghosts that apparently level up. And
Just the look on their face. Oh my god.
oh yeah,
so
just-
funny.
I love the character designs in that game. But that was a fun evening altogether. But I think it really hit a high point when we were trying out, or when you were trying out Venom, who uses a pool cue as his weapon. Knows black magic. I'm letting that sink in because yes, he uses a pool cue as his weapon. Knows black magic. He can summon pool balls that just sort of sit in midair. And when you were trying him out in demo mode, I said, okay, do that input so you can summon like all three of the different pool balls, and you do, and they shift positioning every time you summon. And I told you just to do a basic attack. And you did the basic attack, you poked one, it chain reacted with all the other ones and basically bounced all over the damn screen, and you had this kind of very amazing moment.
Oh, I could recreate it. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And that was I was delighted by it because I was immediately thinking about the possibilities of integrating that into combat, as well as the word I used was ingenuity. Like that is such a creative approach to designing a character, and evidently it was one of the original Guilty Gear characters.
Yeah. In fact, one of his specials is he just unceremoniously summons a black cue ball, and it's only if he hits it, it does the whole animation of like zooming on his face, like you're done now, that kind. And you can get it to chain react with all the other ones, but there's so many interesting mechanics, not only behind Guilty Gear, but behind Blaze Blue, and just Arc System Works in general knows how to make a good fighting game. Like they're responsible for the entire Persona fighting game series, and those have people fighting in the foreground, and basically simultaneously their personas like fighting in the background. And it was sort of an amazing moment because I liked the game, Yuri liked the game, but the whole process of going through all the characters and like having somebody really click, yes, this is why I love this franchise so much.
Mm-hmm.
That was an amazing moment to really like share with somebody like this is what makes this different. This is not Mortal Kombat. This is not Street Fighter. This is Guilty Gear. Let's rock.
There was Venom. I took to Alpha, which I would still consider my main in that game, and then there was a third character that I think I liked more for his personality. It was the assistant to the president.
Oh yeah, Answer.
Yeah.
He spends the whole fight like whenever he's not doing anything, he's got his hand on like his communicator.
Right, and usually when characters defeat the opponent, they have something to say, words to exchange to them, but he doesn't Like
Yes.
he's so focused on the jobs. Like, yes, Mr. President. Yes, the lumber can be there by next week. Like it's just
Yeah, all of his victory animations are him just running off like, sorry, gotta go meeting.
yeah. All right. I mean, small touch on that. I think for me, the first time that I started learning Elfeld was the first time that I really started to like uh, want to learn any of the traditional fighting games because I have been spoiled on the Smash style games,
Mm.
and it's still a little difficult for me to muscle train myself for to get the inputs correctly. And I think one of the things that always was kind of a difficulty for me is justifying the difficulty of these inputs, making sure that I can execute them effectively within the constraints of a timed battle where somebody is coming after me with who knows what, and and to do all that. So I have a lot of respect for the skill and the training that goes into being able to play these characters that effectively. And it's a learning process. Like as a player learns the abilities of their characters, they get better and better on those characters. So it's not like I'm gonna know everything right away. But next time I get to train on Elfelt, I would want to continue. Like it's like a project. Like I want to keep honing the ability, make sure I can get the rifle correct, make sure I can get the shotgun correct, and just go through it little by little. Yeah. Traditional fighting games are very good at teaching people the virtue of patience, I would say. What do I have next? They're not really in order. I just kind of want to make sure I go through the most important ones because we will run out of time. Okay, so this is something that I've brought up in context in these episodes a few times. I think it bears retelling because I've never been able to fully tell the story from start to finish. But it's my experience with Bioshock Infinite, and Bioshock is top 10 for me favorite game franchises. In the most essential approach, I call them the Shock series. So that integrates System Shock, Bioshock, and then maybe they'll come up with something that's a little more politically oriented called Culture Shock, but we'll see. And I really like the original Bioshock, Bioshock 2, sure, thumbs up, kind of like yeah, whatever, it's fine.
Mm.
And then I get to Bioshock Infinite, and it was the most excited I have ever been for a video game to date. And that actually supersedes the Zelda titles, which is surprising because with Zelda, I kind of like, I got my high point with Zelda with Ocarina of Time. As much as I would like for them to surpass that, for me, it's not a realistic expectation. So I'm always just delighted to see what new ideas Nintendo brings into Zelda and how they expand the family. But as far as Bioshock goes, Infinite was, yeah, just like the most excited I had ever been for a video game. And part of that was so first it's that there's that first trailer where he's just getting his ass beat, and it's like, oh, okay, they reveal Columbia, and it's we're out of Rapture, now we're in the sky. Wow, what a setting. That's going to be beautiful. I love cities, I love architecture. The idea of them trying to pull off a city in the sky is amazing, both on a technical feat for what the developers are going to do, but also the story of it, how the people in the game justify and made this work. The second trailer, I must have watched that like 10 times, where he gets up and he's staggered and he's got like, I gotta find Elizabeth, which is his motto. He goes to the bathroom and he's like, I gotta go to the bathroom, I gotta find Elizabeth. Like he's just that's his thing. And he he learns about the corruption that's going on. He tries out the skyline, the sky rails. He gets into some fights. There's some lightning. Elizabeth is super powerful. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot of stuff. But at that point, I understood that this is one of those promotional trailers. Another good one to look into was the Killzone 3 promotional trailer, where they tried to show the idea without actually, like, okay, the game's not actually going to look like this. Sorry. Might have been Killzone 2. Killzone PS3 demo. That's what you have to look up to know what I'm talking about. Then we get to the final Bioshock trailer. And this is where I was convinced that now I am seeing the gameplay. So all of that excuse before, where it's like, okay, this is still conceptual. This is what we're trying to do. Don't take it with a grain of salt. But now it's like, okay, this is the E3 footage. Now we're seeing the HUD. Now we're seeing a life meter. We're seeing abilities actually being deployed, and we're seeing the stage layout, and it's so impressive. It's like a multi-tiered system, and There are triggers that aren't necessarily scripted. They just are things that can happen. And the horror, which is essential to the original BioShock and I guess the System Shock as well. Oh no, not I guess. Oh, definitely horror. Was evident in the way that Booker and Elizabeth are wandering through the streets, and and they could get involved. The player could get involved in what's happening, but the player has to choose: do I really want to make a stand here? I think I should just leave this alone. And it brings up all of these moral conundrums that players are like to struggle with. And yeah, and then a huge fight breaks out, and I'm like, I think I'm gonna have to upgrade my PC to play this. I don't think I'm gonna be able to run it on this, but worth it. And so then BioShock Infinite comes out, and I get to that, and I'm playing through it, and I'm still enjoying it, but my suspicion is I don't think this game is going to amount to what I had seen, and it didn't. I get to the same point that was demonstrated in the footage, and it's 1/8 of what they showed in that what I thought was gameplay footage thing, and it's formative in a negative way because a lot of unfortunate dealings went down. I think that they bit off more than they can chew, and they promised they were No Man's Land before No Man's Land. Like, and this has happened to other people too.
Wait, No Man's
Well,
Sky?
No Man's Sky, yeah, sorry.
No, okay, no. Sky was an absolute flop. Infinite is still a good game. It may not have lived up to the hype, but No Man's Sky was, here's all the promises we're going to make, and here's all the promises we didn't deliver on. Notice how my hands didn't move. Like, that was
Okay, granted. Yeah, not the best comparison, but that was. I went through that. What I think the people who were looking forward to No Man's Sky were looking forward to. They got it worse than we did. I'll give you that. It's just that, yeah, like I don't want to point fingers at anybody because I think everybody wanted this to turn out as good as we saw it. It's just that I think that what I suspect happened is the Xbox 360 and the PS3, which was where the game was going to be released at the time, could not run it.
No, they admitted that. They said
Yeah.
initially that their engine was supposed to have every one of those floating islands floating independently of each other. Obviously, there's a script to prevent them from just crashing into each other, but that the gaming consoles at the time could not handle it. Similar thing actually happened to Crysis 2. They had to dumb down the graphics on several levels because the console versions couldn't take all that graphics and still let you like shoot a tree, grab the tree branch, and throw it at somebody like that. The interactive nature of the Crysis engine, which they wanted to show off. We've had a number of sort of kicks to the leg, I wouldn't go so far up as the balls, because of dealing with stagnant consoles. Which, thankfully, with PC gaming being very steady, a lot of people have learned that you want to treat your PC gaming customers right. So we haven't had a lot of that, thankfully, unless you include a couple of bad ports, but those tend to get fixed.
If not by the developers, then by the community itself.
Yeah.
Which is still not. It doesn't reflect highly on the developers, but the point being is that if the players are that passionate, they will get to it.
Skyrim had a fan patch that upgraded the graphics since it also had to be downgraded, and the developers liked it so much it went right onto the Steam store for free, obviously. But it's just like free DLC. Here's the better graphics package.
Mm-hmm. And I to this day, I would still like to play the version of Infinite that I was promised. I do understand what happened, but I think that's one of those moments where we realize like the people that we look to provide our entertainment or our medium or beyond that to the more important things like answers to life's questions or government, it just goes up and up and up and up. They're as infallible as the rest of us, and we understand that mistakes will be made. Everybody just wants the lines of communication to be as clear as possible, and so to be promised that in a way that suggested that this is what we're going to get, I think is a few steps too far, and it's just it's over that line of like it's past the line where now I feel burned by it, and I still feel burned by it, and most hours of the day I don't think about it because I have more important things to do. But for the sake of what they were trying to do, it was such a beautiful idea that it's a shame that the idea has not actually been fully realized yet, and I hope that will change in time. Okay.
All right. So my next
If you want
one.
to do two in a row, because that one was a doozy.
Well, I've got a short one, so I'll do that one, and then I'll do the next one after that. So the first one is back when the original Xbox came out. I can't call it the Xbox One because they sort of screwed up their own numbering system. We can call it the PS1 because it was the first PlayStation. It's not like they're. Anyways,
Mhm.
I really hope this actually exists and I'm not hallucinating this. Was there a version of the Xbox that had two game disc slots in it and two outputs in the back so that the system could basically LAN with itself? That you could hook up two TVs with two copies of Halo and actually have two people playing. Did that actually exist or did I just invent that somewhere in my head?
My gut says you are correct that there are two. There is a double disc Xbox. I don't know all the details for it, but we will look into that and we will provide an answer in the comments.
Okay, but anyways, I was playing against my uncle, and I just want to say my uncle's an asshole. That's not even a subjective statement. That is a quantifiable statement. Most of the family doesn't talk to him anymore.
I believe that if you say you have proof, I believe you.
Okay, but at the time I was still like I was a PC gamer. I was playing Unreal Tournament. I was doing like those kinds of Twitch shooty games. And he invited me down to the basement. It's like, "Hey, let's play some Halo. Like the Halo's like this big game right now and everyone likes it. And like look at this fancy new Xbox first that I have." And we played and I was getting my butt kicked because I'm used to Twitch shooters. I'm used to keyboard and mouse, and here I was for one of the first times in my life like fighting with a thumbstick to get a headshot in a span of time that if I was on the PC, I probably could have gone 10 headshots. And he would kill me. It's like, ha, this is fun. Like, all this kind of stuff. Um, Eventually, because I still had good instincts. It was just like the interface for the game was bad. But eventually, I was able to line something up with the sniper rifle. I did get him with an actual headshot for one hit kill, and he just immediately shut up. We finished the match sort of in silence. He still won. He still killed me more times than I killed him. But the fact that I was able to line up that one headshot and he went from like, taunting and laughing every time, just dead silent, stern face for the rest of the match. Like, thank you. He would then later in life go to try to influence my grandmother to change her will while she was mentally infirm. So, grade A asshole. So my next one, which is on a slightly bigger or slightly better note, you're familiar with Black Flag, right? Assassin's Creed 4. Now, this had the whole sections where you could pilot a pirate ship and shoot cannons at things, raid other ships, that kind of stuff. A mechanic so great that it alone apparently won an award, and Ubisoft has been doing their spin-off where you're just doing pirates that they announced. Then Skull and Bones said, "We're going to jump on this before this is a thing," and made a crappy game that didn't deliver on anything as buggy as all hell. I've seen lots of videos of they're just sailing along, and all of a sudden the ship starts sailing into the sky, and they start clipping into the ground, and now they're sinking while their ship sails off. Oh look, there it goes, flying through the sky. um, but back to Black Flag.
Yeah, I just realized. Okay, took me a second.
Yeah, the ship was very hard to handle, and on the one hand, this annoyed me a bit. But on the other hand, it's a wooden ship with sails filled with cannons. It's not a modern warship. It's not a video gamey ship. It's a wooden ship with sails, piloted or manned by a bunch of random crew people. I think they did a great job of ambience, like hearing orders shout all over the place. When you're not in battle, you can actually just they do sea shanties, and you can decide, I don't like this shanty, go to another random shanty, stuff like that. And over the course of the game, I eventually learned a lot of interesting tricks. You just rapidly hammer the button that allows you to fold up your sails, use that to turn really quickly, then let out the sails again to do like a quick burst in the other direction. I learned how to time waves to basically like, the enemy's going to fire at me. So I would like go down, have them fire all their cannons into the wave, and then the cannon comes back. It's like, guess what? We're done loading. And although the ship was still difficult to handle, it was still like frustrating a lot of levels. I'd learned the ship. I'd learned its turn speed. I'd learned how fast it can barrel into things. I had learned, what instances are for what tactics. And there's plenty of times where I think, oh, I'd like to do this. No, wait, I know I can't do that. So I'm going to do this instead. And it was this amazing moment when I realized that the ship itself hadn't magically transformed into a video game ship. It hadn't magically gained bells and whistles that would make no sense whatsoever for the time. as if gold-plated mortar cannons already didn't make sense for the time.
Hmm.
It was me. I had learned the flaws of the Jackdaw, and I'd learned how to work around those flaws. And I've learned that the other ships I'm fighting have the exact same flaws, and I know how to exploit them now. And sort of realizing that I'd reached that level was an amazing feeling because it took a lot of work to get there. And to say that this isn't perfect, but I made it work, really feels like it was me. Like, feels like an actual accomplishment. And it was a little sad in the next game when they did Assassin's Creed Rogue. That ship was very video gamey. Like, its turn speed, the way ramming worked, the little auto cannon thing. Like, a lot of the aspects of it just really didn't feel right anymore. And playing it felt like, this feels like a dumbed down ship. I feel like Ubisoft is insulting me. It's like, I know how to handle a ship. Give me the ship back.
Hmm. Would you say that the design of the ship, and your positive takeaway, not the video game one afterwards, but would you say that you sensed it was pretty close to a representation of how ships were actually genuinely run at the time?
I'm not sure. I mean, my ability to pull up the sails near instantly, then drop the sails near instantly, I feel like that's something you'd have to rig long in advance. Like, we're going to perform this maneuver. Because I know from looking at actual videos of ships, it can take several minutes to get all the sails put up. But I assume if you loop ropes correctly, you can have people like jump off the mast with the ropes and just counterweight the whole thing. Obviously, it's a video game. I think a lot of things were simplified for the sake of video gaminess, but whether or not all the difficulties were meant to be a realistic representation of a ship, I do think they tried to make it somewhat authentic within the bounds of we don't want to frustrate our players too much.
Right. And I think the good thing about trying to take a more realistic approach rather than a less realistic approach is it shows a respect for the craft, but also for the player, and also for the idea that while this does not qualify a person to go out and physically run a ship,
Oh God,
it's
no.
it's a step in the right direction as opposed to a misstep, but with good intentions, because maybe it will generate interest in ships in somebody who, I mean, I don't know if you're ever gonna go to the sea in that way, but there might have been other players who, especially if they're younger and they're trying to figure out what it is they like and what they dislike. That experience, I think, could have yielded better results for them in their lifespan than if it was only just the arcade ship. So it is kind of a shame that they decided to go with a more effective control scheme later down the line. It reminds me of Shadow of the Colossus, where any time that I had used a horse up to that point, which was just Zelda, it was the more video gamey control, where essentially now I'm on a horse, but I'm controlling the horse more or less the same way that I control the character, save for the addition of 2 more legs. But on Shadow of the Colossus, they did the rein system, so you could prompt the horse to move forward, and then you would have to pull the reins to steer the horse, and it took a little bit of getting used to, but I would say that it was closer to the principles of actually riding a horse, and had a better shot at generating interest in it, because video games do this amazing thing where video games especially, they do this amazing thing where they get people to take an interest in things that they might not have been interested in, because we can interact with these things. Yeah, like a movie or even a documentary or TV show can have a more accurate depiction of what it's like, I guess, depending on the film, right? But with a video game, the ability for somebody to actually like have their hands involved in it, I think creates a better connection to whatever it is. And people were complaining about that with Guitar Hero for a long time when it first came out. It's like, why don't you just learn to play real guitar? I'm like, well, I'm getting some of the principles down of rhythm, and yeah, no, I'm not. I mean, I can't get past medium because I get motion sickness, but it's that next positive step towards picking up an actual guitar. It's genuinely a good thing.
And, I didn't walk away from that game with the desire to be a sailor, but I did walk away from that game with a lot of interest in sea shanties. Farewell and adieu to you Spanish ladies, farewell and adieu
Would you
to
like
you
to
ladies
end on a
of
sea
Spain.
shanty? Would you like to end on a shanty?
Oh, wow, we're that out of time?
No, I'm just saying for when we're out of time, which
No,
is not too far from now. But
I was just going to do the opening verse, but you interrupted me. Just go.
okay, fine. I know, seriously, closing the shanty. I think it would be great. Okay, so I haven't figured out if this is actually like formative, but it's one of the funnier things that happened to me. So Pokemon Stadium on the Nintendo 64. The idea was one would have Pokemon Red or Pokemon Blue, and they would take those exact Pokemon, use whatever dongle Nintendo comes up with so that they can do the transfer, and then play with those Pokemon, the ones that one has connected with for however long, and go into the tournaments and fight. If you don't have that, because not everybody has a budget for the dongles in the Nintendo library, and they have a lot of dongles. It's just a fun word to say.
Mm.
So they have all the Pokemon on rent. I thought it was the most baffling thing why they would bother just like having all the Pokemon listed because why like, you can have like the Charizards and the Articunos. So me versus a friend. I don't remember 5 of the 6 Pokemon he drafted because I didn't get past number 1. His first Pokemon was Gengar. I went with what I thought was like the primo shit. Like Charizard, Venusaur, Blastoise, Articuno, Moltres, Zapdos.
None of them type match.
So here's what happens. Gengar has Thunderbolt. Blastoise, no chance. Anybody with flying that's not also electricity, no chance. He is careening through my forces, and I am just like, why? Why does Gengar have Thunderbolt? And I mean,
Because technical Marines are awesome. That's why.
because technical Marines.
TMs.
Oh, TM's right. Oh, I didn't know. I thought it was technical machine
It could be machine.
or technique machine. Let's get the answer for that one too. Actually, yeah, this is what we're gonna start doing. By the way, we'll actually answer these questions in the comments. I mean, sometimes we don't realize we're gonna mention this until you know. And oh my god, it was funny. And the thing that the formative thing that I took away from it didn't have so much to do with the game. It had to do with my ability to laugh at myself. There are things that I will acknowledge that are like funny, even and humor is directed at me. I am being laughed at, but this is one of the things where I can laugh at it too. And it was because it's so funny, and I'm getting so frustrated by it. And I'm going to link to a picture that I'm going to have to put onto my Instagram, and it will be up before this episode is out. 11 years later, my friend gave, as a birthday gift, his girlfriend drew the scene out of Gengar electrocuting Charizard, and I framed that on the wall next to the mercy certificate. Just this wall of antagonism, and yeah, it was just like I'm relieved because, you know, growing up a gamer is not easy, and I'm sure most people understand why.
Yeah, well, but I mean, I do think our generation, so to speak, had a lot worse because when we were starting out, gaming wasn't really that accepted. It wasn't really an acceptable hobby. It's, you know, when we did their episode about what makes a real gamer, I expressed, you know, frustration in people who play, you know, Candy Crush and say you're a gamer. It's like, no, like I was made fun of at school for liking Magic. I was made fun of at school for liking Doom. I was made fun of, etc. Like that's what we grew up with. And I think a lot of people who are in the hobby now don't have to deal with the same kind of animosity we did.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. The difficulties do change. I would say that the generation growing up right now, their challenge is going to be the anxiety that comes with the knowledge of how long they might be able to live for. Because I think anxiety has a lot to do with uncertainty. And when somebody thinks that they're going to live until 30 because they live in a wooden house and there's bears, there's tension, sure. There's adrenaline, sure. But they're not anxious. You know, we have some anxiety because I know that I'm going to clear 60. I'm shooting for 80. And depending on my health at the time, I'm actually planning on just like inviting people to my funeral and saying goodbye to everybody and then kill myself so that I actually have a funeral where I can say goodbye to everybody and be like, okay, guys, okay, this is great. And you did say this was a dark episode.
I said this was an emotional episode and that we were wearing black.
Broad strokes, dark, but okay, fair enough. So...
Do you need someone to talk to?
No. Well, actually, I did have someone to talk to. BetterHelp.com, counseling, pretty good. I'm going for the humor of this because I think it'd be hilarious and dark and very Joe of me to actually plan my funeral in advance. So.
Well, you would have died as you lived.
Yeah. So the challenges have changed. Not to say that one group of people doesn't have challenges. It's just that the challenges transform with the times, and so we faced a particular set of challenges that we overcame for the most part. And so when I got to coming back to this Pokemon story, it meant a lot to me to be able to laugh at it because I'm being laughed at, but I'm finding it funny too, and it didn't chip away at my insecurities or my ego. It was just like a healthy way to self-deprecate, and so that was an important moment for me. And yeah,
Um,
I am fine, by the way.
okay. I think the next story I'm going to go with is actually going to be paintball, which is still considered a game.
Yeah.
It was at my cousin's birthday, a different side of the family than the asshole uncle. And it was basically a bunch of kids. But it was one of those things where just because they're kids doesn't mean they don't play paintball. So I didn't go into this expecting like I'm going to cream the corners with them. Like it's a team-based game, so we're going to have to all work together as a team, that kind of stuff. But we still had a lot of incompetence going on. Like it was clear when my cousin and his dad, so again my nice uncle, were on the same team. It's like, wait, but these are the two people who suggested we go paintballing. I'm getting stuck with the low ELO guys, aren't I? And there was a lot of messes going along. It was sort of called a football mode, where there was originally a flag in the middle, and you had to grab the flag and basically put it on your enemy's flag post. Or, well, flag center. You don't have to actually string it up. And the arena was one straight hallway down the middle, and then heavy brush on either side, like trees, all that kind of stuff. The things you can definitely trip and hurt yourself on. Or you could just gun down the middle and be an open target for everyone. So I'd been knocked off for the whatever time. I've had people like basically, I had one person like point a gun at me, offer me mercy, then shoot me anyways. Thanks for the welt, you freaking little ankle biter. And then I basically went back, to the respawn thing, touched it, and it's like, I'm done. I go back in, bang, 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 bang. Come across somebody. I thought he said don't shoot, or turns out he said I'm shot. Bang, grab the flag. I think I actually shoot one of my allies in that little whatever thing. Grab the flag and I gun it down the center. Like there was a time where I was a good runner. I don't do a lot of running anymore. I primarily bicycle places, but when I
think some of your muscles would still be intact.
So the muscles will be intact, and even if you're not using the exact right muscles, because biking and running are, not exactly the identical muscles on your legs, it's a matter of endurance. Like, I can beat most people in bicycling in endurance because like, oh, they're speeding ahead of me, and then halfway through the race is like they have to slow down. I'm still going at the same pace right past them. Tortoise hair, I guess. No, wait, the hair fell asleep. But I gunned it down the center, and I could see my cousin was coming out, and I said, don't do it. And the moment he comes out, bang. And then, same thing with my uncle. Like, I can see him coming out. I was like, don't do it. And because of how the tree was, I pretty much point blanked him in the gut. So he got a pretty nasty welt there. Sorry about that. And I just kept going, and right to the end and scored. Because, to me, I was just getting tired of these teammates. I was getting tired of it. And it's always interesting when you could turn that frustration into basically God mode. It's like, I'm not pissed off this team and rage quitting. Fine, I'll carry you all, you bastards. And it was a nice adrenaline moment because, yeah, that was me. Rest of those guys, they're still over there. That was all me.
Okay, so just one thing I want to clarify. So that first wave of pop, 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 were those your teammates?
Those were the enemies. I think.
What were they doing there? Because I'm just trying to understand, the spawn.
Yeah. Well, the point of the mode was, again, to take the flag, which started in the middle, and put it on your opponent's base. The difficulty is, or put it on, like, this thing on your opponent's side. The difficulty is that your opponents respawn, so to speak, right behind it. So they were on our side, basically putting a lot of pressure there because they wanted to get the flag and put it onto the score zone. So that's why the flag was on our side, and I could just grab it and gun down the middle. My job, again, was to then clear the entire play arena to score on their side. But, yeah, that's why the flag, or the handkerchief, whatever, was in our territory.
Okay. That's a great story. Yeah. I'm happy for you. Yeah. So we're coming up on the end here, and I just want to... Okay. We might have to revisit this because I do have more. And even as we've been talking, other stuff that I haven't thought about started like, oh yeah, that one. So I would be happy to do this style episode later down the line. So
I do think these kinds of things are fun because it talks about how we've been affected. I mean, we do technical stuff, and I'm a fan of technical stuff. That's when I watch a lot of shows with technical stuff in it. But this really is a hobby. It's not a science. And talking about how we feel and how this makes us feel, I think is important. Because to quote extra credits, because, you know, we don't plug you guys enough, you know, games matter.
I agree completely. Almost to the point where we should have just stopped there. But no, I'm going to tell this more story. Okay. So, Warcraft 2. It was, not counting maybe the 6 or 7 Sega Genesis games I played before I started playing on the PC. Oh, yeah. So, let's just start with the PC. So, Warcraft 2 was the third PC game that I played. First PC game was Toy Story. Second PC game was Command & Conquer Red Alert. So, the violence ramped up super quick for me. And then Warcraft 2 was a lateral ramp because it was still violent, but in a different way, in a goofier way. But the blood was more pronounced, and there was death and decay, and all that good stuff. And you know how like parents or concerned lawmakers, lawyers, whatever, they're worried that
Of the children.
we do think of the children. We feel very terrible for them. They're concerned that video games are going to influence real life behavior. Well, it did. The influence in particular wasn't taking a sword to somebody. Wasn't trying to throw lightning. It wasn't anything like that. It was when the peasant was ordered to go chop a tree. That was like a new thing for me because before then the only resource gathering I had seen was in Command and Conquer, where you had this truck that would drive over to a bunch of mineral deposits on the ground, use an arm built into it, and throw it into it drive back to the refinery, and repeat the process until it ran out. And then, whew, that's a depressing sight. But with the peasants, they had to go to the mines to grab gold and bring it back. When they go to the trees, they grab their looked more like a pick than an axe, but you know, I was a kid at the time, and would chop the tree. And I thought that was really cool because that's what they got to do to get lumber. So fast forward to that summer, and I wanted to make a lemonade stand, and we have a tree in our backyard, and I go, "Hey, Dad, can I chop the tree down to make a lemonade stand?" And he goes, "Yeah." I suspect that he wasn't listening, nor was I clear enough in my intent. So I would take 68% of the blame. And so I go into the backyard.
Well done, Abraham Lincoln.
And thank you. This is a plum tree. This thing is already bearing fruit, and we didn't have an axe. So I grabbed my hammer, and I used the part that you use to de-nail something.
Oh, God.
And I start I get halfway through before somebody stops me. He's like, "What are you doing?" And well, the tree didn't survive because it was hacked away at the side, and then I never even made the lemonade stand afterwards. But I was so influenced by the idea of chopping a tree down that I wanted to go chop the one tree down that I had access to. And since that day, video games have rarely, if ever, influenced my behavior. But it's actually like, fair point. You know, video games influencing behavior. The difference was like when people are worried about like video games causing violence, is that it takes quite a few illogical leaps to want to actually commit violence, and unfortunately, it does happen. But there absolutely is a point there to seeing something and then wanting to emulate the behavior.
Well,
that is absolutely true.
I don't think you can solely blame video games because you can blame movies for that.
Movies, comics,
books.
Elvis.
Yeah, Elvis. We are influenced by outside media. Like, we do suck it up. We are partially a product of our environment. So I do think there's a lot of focus put on video games, but if video games had been around, they'd probably be complaining about books. I mean, remember, I don't know if you remember back when the radio first came out, a lot of people cursed it as a devil's machine and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think when they did the first broadcast of War of the Worlds, they thought it was a legit alien invasion.
Turns
People
out not.
Yeah, no.
That story was exaggerated. There was some panicking, but nowhere near the levels.
People would turn into it and maybe think
partway through, yeah. But
Okay.
it was mostly phones to the police office saying, "What the hell is going on?"
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
All right. So since you did go first, I guess I do have one last one that is quick, and this sort of relates to again the idea of influence that video games have on real life. Now, something I learned very quickly in video games is unfortunately there is a level of toxicity going on, and toxicity does tend to breed more toxicity. Like if you're frustrated and you got people yelling at you for stupid reasons, it makes you more frustrated and you can end up inadvertently adding to it. What I sort of learned relatively early on is, oh right, there's a mute function. Usually it's on the tab button, but I basically adopted my own personal zero tolerance policy to people harassing me in games or making annoying comments in games, where I just immediately bring up the communications menu and mute whoever it is and just move on. Like, there's no point in engaging, there's no point in doing all that stuff. I just immediately move on. And this is something I think a lot of people forget. I mean, every time we hear about the supposed amount of harassment that people have in video games and like the bully hunters fiasco and all that kind of stuff, I keep thinking, but you can mute them. And I even tried having a conversation with somebody else, I was like, and she said, oh, well, you shouldn't have to mute them. They should just automatically be nice to you. I was like, yeah, but I mute them and that solves the problem. And this is something that I carried over, like, is influenced real life and in real life influenced games because I used to work in retail. In fact, I've had several retail jobs. And you'll notice that there's a lot of customers just being assholes, and there's no point in engaging with them. Just get them out of the store, just do whatever it takes. And part of that is, again, influenced from games, the idea of here's an annoying person, just mute them and move on with your life. And part of that comes from retail, where it's like, there's no, like, I'm not going to see this person again ever in my life, just ignore them and move on with life. It is this idea of learning to prioritize what fights are worth having, because there are fights worth having, there are conversations worth having. And a lot of times, well, you know what? You're my teammate for this quick match game. I'm never going to see you again. I'm going to mute you, and I'm just going to move on with my life. And I think that's something a lot of people have forgotten when we talk about toxicity. It's like, look at this thing that gamers face. Look at this thing that women face. Look at this thing. It's like, well, do what I do. Do what everyone's supposed to do. Mute them. Because if I chase after you in real life, start yelling expletives at you, I'm there. I'm in real life. You kind of have to address me. If we're in a game together and I'm throwing expletives at you, you push tab and you click that little icon next to my name, and you never have to hear from me again.
Mute and report too.
I find they have to cross a line for me to report them.
Fair enough. Well, the option is still there in most cases.
Yeah, well, I mean, especially Dota 2 limits your reports, which I think is a good idea. It stops you from just throwing a ton of reports out there. But
yeah, they're having a couple of instances where I'm like, oh, I really wish I held on to one of these.
Yeah, but it's the idea of picking your battles and picking your interactions, and that's something I learned both from video games and from my time in retail, that there are just so many times you don't have to deal with, like, this is just not worth dealing with.
Yeah, like I had a conflict and I wasn't sure how to go about it, so I spoke to my lawyer. That's not as braggadocious as you might think. We have a quid pro quo, and the quote that she used was, "Is this the hill you want to die on?" Now, I don't think I was actually going to die, but the idea is this is going to take a part of my life with it. This is my life. No one values my life as much as me. Well, okay, maybe my mom a little bit more than me, but that's her job. Do I really want to give a part of myself to this? Do I want to leave a part of my energy, my resources, and my time, and all of these things that are precious on this conflict? And it's not like she was talking me out of it. It was just a way of reframing the ordeal and saying, is it worth it to you, yes or no? Yeah. Shanti to take us out? Oh, wait, sorry, we have to thank. We're going to have some links in the comments or in the description just to cover some of the stuff that we weren't too sure about here. I have an Instagram called Joseph Ayani, thanks you for waiting, and my picture will be, it's a great title, I'm so in love with it. And the Pokemon picture will be there. And we are hosted by, by YouTube, technically. But this is shot at the XS Network, XSN. They're located in Toronto, and they do corporate work, but they also are on the lookout for other content as well. So if you're in Toronto or are knowing your way around the internet, feel free to reach out to them, because it's what they do, and they are quite good at it. So.
All right. Well, we already ruined Spanish Ladies.
We did not ruin it. I was just trying to delegate.
Yeah. All right. Oh, my name was Captain Kidd, as I sailed, as I sailed. Oh, my name was Captain Kidd, as I sailed. My name was Captain Kidd, and God's laws I did forbid, and such villainy I did, as I sailed, as I sailed. Oh, such villainy I did, as I sailed. It's kind of as much as I got.
It was good.
Yeah.